All right. Welcome to Sell Your Body Pod. Julia Claire Wallace, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
You have a very cool background behind you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in my room. It's nice to welcome people in my room. I have many interesting things I love. I love some good objects. So I have a
Yeah.
lot.
I really appreciate when I have someone over and they check out my stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
like, finally.
It's fun.
I'm interested in knowing, so I know that you're a performance artist and a visual artist and a community organizer. Can you just let me know what you do? What is it that you're doing currently?
Sure. Those are all good words for it. I definitely think of myself as an artist. Um, that's kind of the umbrella that I do everything within. Um, and I was currently working at Natsuo downtown, which is a very interesting art space and bar. So I have been putting on shows there and bartending there, which has been really fun. And it's run by Jim Pirtle, who's an artist. I respect a lot of performance artists. I respect a lot, so I've gotten to learn a whole lot while I've been there. I studied painting. I studied arts administration. But right now I'm just chilling out. But I have been doing a lot of community related art projects.
Yeah, I think that you and I can probably both relate to the fact that it seemed very busy kind of right before it slowed way down. Because there was, the big arts festival at Natsuo, which was incredible, so fun, so amazing. And I do want to talk about that, but I also want to talk a little bit about experimental action. What is your role in experimental action, and what does experimental action do?
So experimental action grew out of an international performance art festival in town called Lone Star Explosion. Me and some other wonderful Houston artists started our own festival, basically. We had all been helping a lot and being a part of Lone Star Explosion, but we decided to go our own way and really take our vision and fulfill it in a bigger way. And so that is when experimental action was born, and it was intended to be mostly a festival that happens every 2 years and has performance artists come in from all over the world. We have an awesome local performance art scene that has been growing, and Houston has a great history of performance art. And so I loved the idea of bringing people in and getting them kind of enmeshed for a little bit with all of the artists that are here. So the most valuable part of Lone Star Explosion for me was what happened behind the scenes when these volunteers and these artists were really hanging out. So we expanded on that idea a lot, and it became about making this short-term little community where we're mixing up local artists with artists from all over the world, and it's been really successful. So 2 of them have happened so far, and the next one is tentatively scheduled for February, but it's really hard to plan right now, so we'll see where it goes. But I was doing a lot of things on my own, and also I was working with a big team at first with experimental action, but it's shifted so that a lot of things have melded together. So now experimental action has a lot more components than just the festival. It's sort of brought in Performance Art Night, which is a monthly event that I started, but now is more about this, more connected with this festival and other projects. And then there was going to be an awesome conference that we were working with Joy Harris to create that was supposed to happen in April, called the Revolution Conference, and I was curating artists for that. So it's become a lot more than just this festival, but the mission of experimental action is to is to bring in performance artists to help make Houston artists better and help other artists see Houston artists. And it has done that.
Yeah, I feel when you say, Houston has a growing performance artist scene, that's something that I wasn't really on the pulse of. And then I kind of stumbled into it through comedy and like DIY events and stuff. And really, like, there's some pretty well-established, very talented artists in town. And like, people are sleeping on it. Like, they don't really even, until they go to a performance art night, they really don't get it. Would you be interested in maybe talking about like what performance art is and maybe like some of the reasons that it might not be, super accessible to people that are like on their TV all the time or just go out to drink?
Right. Well, performance art is hard to define. Many people have tried and argued about what the definition is. And it's a question I've gotten a lot, and so many people define it in different ways. I would say that my quick explanation is that it's art that is about the action and the moment rather than an object. And so it can look many different ways, but it's about creating, crafting a moment and experience rather than a painting or a sculpture or something that's going to be passive on a wall. And lots of performance art has group participation, so the audience kind of becomes a part of it very often. But there are so many, it's so broad, but it is also needs to be differentiated from like performing arts and things that are based on tradition or based on things that are repeated. So it's not like a play, there's not a script, and it's not, I mean, sometimes there's elements of that within it. So always people are breaking these rules, but it's more about real life than those things, and about what happens. There's more of a mystery to it. And I fell madly in love with it when I was in school for painting. I was working under my teacher Elia Arce, who's an incredible performance artist, still one of my favorites, and it became almost a way of life. Thinking about what you're going to do as if it was a creative project unleashes magical things. So it's been a wonderful adventure that's made me a much better person and given me a lot of great times. It's hard to share because it's about that moment. You have to really be there to fully understand a performance piece. So even when we're taught performance art in schools and they're like, Chris Burden got shot in a gallery, reading the description of that historical performance art piece, seeing the pictures, seeing the documentation is completely different from an experience you're going to have in a room. We can never know what it was like to be in that room and why that piece was so impactful for some people. And so that's another strange thing about, or another important thing about bringing people in for this kind of festival, because Houston is creating within Houston. We see each other, and it becomes very, like, we can only truly experience what's here unless we go somewhere else. So bringing people in and feeling what other artists are doing really changes the possibilities of what happens here. It blows all of our minds. And I'm really proud to say, like, I got to go to a few other festivals this last year. I got to go to New York and to Pittsburgh and to New Orleans. And I am really proud of Houston. Like, we are really good. And I've seen I've seen performance art in San Antonio as well. Like we truly are. We've built some talented artists within this scene, and we get so used to seeing each other, so sometimes we're kind of jaded. But I mean, we've really come a long way and are doing really interesting things.
That's awesome. I think maybe you deserve a little bit of the credit for that. Can you tell me like what, because you said that you started performance art night and then you made a shift, and I don't know when that shift happened, to do guest curation. Can you like tell me about the motive behind that and the experience that that's been for you?
Yeah. So I was in school for painting, learning from Elia Arce, and a collective was kind of formed out of all of the artists in her class. And it was called Performance Art Lab, and it was really fun. We did lots of crazy projects. Sexy Attack was one of our most well-known projects, which went really viral. And
What was that? I've never even heard of it.
oh my God, you have to look up Sexy Attack
Oh my gosh, yes I do.
on the internet.
Writing it down.
We all learned this dance based off this sexy 80s workout video, and it was it was before flash mobs became like a big commercial thing, so this was more shocking than I think it would be now, because also we didn't have like phones to record it with. We actually carried in like a handheld camera, and we did this like sexy dance in all these different places in Houston, and the videos were hilarious, and got a ton of views and attention, and it was really fun. And so I had been working with all these guys. I loved all of their art. They were all inspiring, made great work together. But then I was like, man, I want to keep doing this stuff. Like, I didn't know at the time of anyone doing performance art in town. I couldn't find it anywhere. Later on, I found out there was pretty interesting history of it that I just hadn't connected with yet. But I was like, I want a place we can practice and do this together. I was like, come on, guys, let's do this. Let's make this thing. But they were kind of going all their own wonderful ways. And so I ended up starting this more on my own. They were in a few of the first ones, but it created a community. Like, we were all there creating pieces for each other, and people were drawn to it. There were a rich community grew out of it, and we kept getting better and better, and it grew in all these different ways. And so I did that for years, and started taking great documentation, which opened up a lot of doors. And then I also had my daughter in there, and there was some pretty cool shows, like big shows that grew out of that. But once I came back after, raising my daughter for a little bit and started running them again, then I ended up wanting to work at Natsuo, and also wanting experimental action to be a part of this. And so one of the things that I was noticing looking at this community is that that not everyone was aware that they could put on a show, and not everyone knew that they could have the power that I had learned that I could have in this role. So I started giving the opportunity to other artists to put a lineup together, and to run the night, and to feel what it's like to put something together like that. And I really wanted to empower some other artists to start being, show creators instead of just artists. It is a whole nother art form in and of itself. And it's been really interesting. It's been a learning process for everybody, I think. And it's brought in a lot of different communities, which has been fun as well.
Yeah, when I did the guest curation, I remember feeling so challenged by, and show running's hard. And it's like, coming from comedy and variety, like I had a very different way of hosting and running a show that had a lot less like on the spot technical necessities, and like a lot more connection with the audience actually, which was challenging as well. And so it was an excellent opportunity for me as someone, even though I knew how to run a show, I didn't know how to run a performance art show. And that
Yeah.
really influenced me as like an artist, not just as a performer or as a booker, but it kind of changed the way that I saw art like in total. So I think it was a really valuable experience. I think it's nice that you provide that for people and the guidance as well.
Thank you. You know, it took me a while to figure out that like the openness that we provide at performance art night wasn't just like laziness or haphazardliness. Like there really is a value and an art to letting things change last minute.
Yeah,
And
which is fucking hard.
it is hard. It is so hard. And at first in my first, I mean, some of my first lessons were like being okay with people just not showing up or saying they were going to do one awesome idea and then completely changing it, and letting go of it. This isn't supposed to be a perfect play. Like this is a ground for experimentation and seeing what will happen when we do what we know we're supposed to do, and like when we try new things, and sometimes it sucks, sometimes it fails, sometimes it's boring, but sometimes it's incredibly divine, like mind-blowing. And that openness allows it, and getting used to that openness and feeling a room and being like, oh shit, I thought that person was supposed to be next, but that needs to not happen right now. It needs to be that person. And like, sorry guys, like switch it up, and like going with it that way, that there is a huge value to working that way, even though it is insane and people often think you're insane for being that loose. I try really hard to make people feel better about the scariness of it. But I thrive in the murkiness. So that's been interesting. It's like to support the people who want the plan and the time, while holding space for the magic.
That's amazing. I love that. And I was actually thinking about like how it is really magic and that it's managing the chaos in a way, and like trying to help people, even the audience, become comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. I don't even really know your origin story. You said that you went to school for painting. Have you been like a lifelong visual artist? Like when did it start for you? Were you like a theater kid?
I never did any theater. Although I wanted to, like in my room, I would sing, you know, I loved musicals, and I would sing these songs, but I was so terrified to be on stage or to be seen. So,
Wow.
and I'm terrible at memorizing things. So I never like got a part, which was probably good. But yeah, I did love drawing and making things my whole life. And when I got to school, I thought I'd be an art teacher, an English teacher. I like writing as well. But then I just really fell in love with the art and learning how to create, and creation for the sake of creation. And I mean, I fell madly in love with it. And painting, I love painting. But it's hard to paint when you have a kid is one thing. But also what I felt like what really blew my mind when I was painting was when I was painting portraits, and my relationships with the people I was painting changed through the process of painting them. Wow. And I would have all these realizations through recreating them. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm seeing just a picture of them, and this picture of them is like flowing through me, and I'm making what I think the picture is, but it's totally different from the picture, and the picture isn't even them. Like it changed the way I could relate to people. And so then I was like, well, I mean, I care less about the painting than the action. And so like, you know, could I do this better with something besides paint and a canvas? Like, can I expand on the transformational process of this action? And so that became the direction I went. It's like, what actions can I do that will change me and change the world and change the way I relate to people? And that's kind of how that went down. But my first performance art class I dropped, and
Wow,
after
really?
going twice, and the second time, yeah, like I was supposed to do a performance. I was terrified. I drank whiskey before the class to try to like be okay with it. And then she like I go to class and she's like, okay, everyone move all the chairs. And I was like, oh Lord, like it was horrible. So like I dropped it.
That's so funny to hear because like look at you now. Was it a stage
Yeah.
fright situation? Like
Yeah,
afraid
I
of
was
being seen?
really scared of doing things in front of people and quickly. Like I was very scared of what that would be. But then I got used to the idea, dove back in, and I think my first thought was like, okay, I've realized that what performance art is you're supposed to do the thing that you're most terrified of doing. That's it. And so my first performance was terrifying, which worked out pretty well because people can, like, the nervousness that you feel on stage it can make your performance better. And also you can do actions that like avoid the stage completely, like, oh, I'm going to be in a box in the back of the room instead. You know, you can do whatever, you can work with your feelings in multiple ways. But that first performance was really powerful for me, and I shook the whole day before even getting on stage, and I wouldn't let them record it or
What was
anything.
it? Do you remember what you were doing?
I was very, very afraid of revealing my body, and it was basically, like, short version is that like I cut off multiple layers of clothing until I was naked on stage at the University of Houston with a small group of people, and there had been no nudity in class, like, and I had never revealed myself like that before, and it was really intense for me. And it's funny because like later on in the semester, some girl just took off her shirt, but like it was a whole nother experience because she wasn't scared at all. Like that was very normal for her. And I was like, wow, like the different ways you play it, the feelings you bring to it completely change the experience of the room.
That's so interesting to think about, like that, you know, like how much context do we always, you know, when I watch performance art, there isn't always like a verbal, like, I'm scared to take my clothes off, and so this is going to be challenging for me. But there
Right.
is like, people get the fucking vibe and they're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like she's scared to take her clothes off.
Yeah.
It's so unique in that way.
Yeah. And that is naturally, I've just picked up so many things that I didn't even realize I was picking up in putting on the performance art night shows. Like if you want people to pay attention, like you have to read the room, and there are little things that you know you can do that will work, and there are things you know that will not work, and all of that really changes the way you do performance. It is a craft, even though like a lot of people don't acknowledge that sometimes. Like a lot of the things look easy, but I don't think that even matters. It's about the experience that happens, and what gifts that experience has for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to hear kind of from your perspective about putting on the 2020 show at Natsuo, and maybe describe a little bit of what it was and what the experience was like for you.
Sure. I'm so glad that happened when it did, because it really was like an amazing celebration of lots and lots of people that probably will not be able to happen for a really long time again. But yeah, that was a collaborative piece with Jim Pirtle, who owns Natsuo. And I had come back into town from all these other festivals, and I was amazed to see how small the spaces are that people are working with in other cities. Like all of the spaces I saw were like much tinier and much more constricted than Natsuo. I guess there was like a couple that were bigger, but they had way more rules. So I came back to Houston with just like a huge appreciation for the gift of all the crazy space that is Natsuo, which Natsuo is a 3-story building downtown that's worth millions of dollars. But fortunately for all of us artists in town, our strange, eccentric artist, Jim Pirtle, bought it like 24 years ago for a very small amount of money, and like doesn't make choices based on how much money he can make off of that place, but more of like what's interesting to him. So it's this huge building is absolutely a sculpture in and of itself, and also a social sculpture. So I was kind of just obsessed with this idea of space. And so we started, brainstorming all these ideas, and it became like, hey, let's get 20 different artists teams to each use a different space in this building and to do something amazing all on one night. And
on February 20th, 20 artists, 2020.
2020.
So cute.
Yeah. And it worked out really well, because for the 4 months beforehand, we were telling everybody 220, and people just remembered. But yeah, there was so many incredible artists that utilized, like, they just came and like enlivened that space so much in a way that's been really lasting, and I think a way that's changed the way Jim is interacting with the space now, and changing what the space will be in the future. There was just tons of incredible stuff going on, and it's always interesting working with Jim. Like I both of us get a lot out of like throwing ideas back and forth and trying to find a balance. So I did a visual art show within it. So that was one of my pieces, and he did a performance piece on the top floor. But we also just had a ton of other amazing teams. We had a team that usually does haunted houses take over one space. We had some interactive video, we projections, we had a puppeteer, we had a 360 dome experience, we had a huge market of vendors on the bottom floor, and there's so many artists that made it happen that I can't even begin to name. There was amazing comedy by you in the stand-up or crouch down comedy space. But we wanted each of the projects to really be site specific, to acknowledge the place that they are, and interact with it. And I think they did. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I think that there's like, yeah, you should be proud of it. It was incredible. And Jim is brilliant and you are brilliant, and I think y'all make for an incredible alchemy. And the thing about like the site specific like prompt of kind of like letting an artist sort of use the space as inspiration, I think like that's so interesting to hear that you were inspired by the small spaces, because Natsu is a very like historical space that has a lot of energy in it. And when I think about kind of like the DIY scene, like, we're in like dilapidated houses and like in parking lots and warehouses. And so like the energy of the space is really a part of our work, because we are limited. You know what I mean? Not all of us have $1 million building. And so like, it's like kind of like that class of art that I think is, in my experience, a lot more emotionally accessible. Like it's easier for me to release and let go in a space that feels magical, because the piece was created in that space and for that space.
It is, I think it's one of those skills that you can use in creating performance art, is acknowledging the space and utilizing it the best you can. And it's something that a lot of people forget to do. Like, a lot of people are just like, oh yes, I'm going to do this small action on the stage. But there are so many possibilities. Sometimes, yes, of course, do the action on the stage. But think about what you have, like what it feels like here. Don't do a performance that you would do in a small white box gallery in Natsuo. It's not going to work.
It will
it's
not be
not
the
going to
same.
look the same. Yeah, acknowledge what's here. And it's funny because people have told me, like, they're like, why, let's do it somewhere else. I'm tired of Natsuo. And I'm like, well, we haven't even tapped, like, there's so much crazy potential in that space, and it's so exciting to me. And when people say they're tired of it, I'm like, are you sure? Like, have you looked around? Like, there's so much to do. And yes, there's a ton of other spaces in Houston, absolutely, but it is incredible that an artist has given Houston the opportunity to use Natsuo, and I don't know how long it'll last. And it is a crazy set of circumstances that have given us this gift. And I do want to use it while we can. At least it's still really interesting to me. So
And the people, I mean, not to like go off the rails, but the people that come in there, there's always some kind of crazy synchronicity or like wild rabbit hole, like people that are in and out of Natsuo.
Yeah, it is a strange mix of people.
I'm a little curious about kind of not necessarily, oh man, I lost my train of thought because my cat's in my lap. Hold on. She's like trying to give me biscuits. What it would be like what do you see yourself if you were to kind of like max out your potential as an artist? Like, do you see yourself more on the performance side or the organization side, and like kind of what your experience is on both ends of those? Because that's something I kind of resonate with as well, being a performer and a producer. Like, where, like, is there ever a fork in the road for you? Like, do you have one that you like a little better, or is it with your mood, or how does that feel for you?
It definitely depends on what's needed at the time. What is interesting, I mean, I think about, and I think it's really helpful to think about my administration as art. Experimental action absolutely is a oh no, can you see me?
I see a big beautiful J.
There. Okay.
Hi.
I think of experimental action as a social sculpture, meaning like I'm crafting this experience for us. It is very, like, my leadership role in there is absolutely a performance art piece. And I even took it up a notch this last time and did a performance art piece within it, which was tied to my performance of putting the whole thing together. I love the freedom of creativity that I have there. And I love being able to act as an artist rather than as someone who's administrating for the reasons other people often administrate. Like, I am not very excited about working for other people at this point. At least working for Jim leaves a lot of space for creativity, but working for most people, it's just not, those aren't the goals. They usually don't have goals that align with mine. Sometimes they do. But yeah, I'm much more interested in working in this like creative way than just being an administrator.
I love that sentence, that my leadership role is a performance art piece. That's so fucking cool. And I totally see that for you. I'm curious about what like advice you would have for someone that wants to get into performance art. Like, if someone's listening to this and they're like, oh my God, like, I've seen performance art, I'd love to do it. Like, what would you tell them?
Well, what would I tell them right now? Right now, there's not a lot of opportunities to perform at something like performance art night, but there's a million ways to do performance art pieces. I might suggest starting to write down ideas and maybe starting to do little tiny performances in their own life and seeing what that feels like, and preparing for something bigger, but also like reading about what other people have done with with the intention of being inspired and informed about the potential. Like it should, if they're reading things, it should be to show how many endless potential there are for performing, rather than like this is how it's done.
Mm.
But yeah, there should be some practice.
I like the idea of doing tiny performances in your life. What does that look like? Like putting the wrong name down at Starbucks, or?
um, well, I talk a lot when I'm teaching performance art. I talk a lot about the blind urge, which is something the writer Henry Miller wrote about, which he said, loosely, the quote is something like, whatever growth, whatever evolution, it comes from following the blind urge. So I
Ooh.
found, like, yeah, when listening to myself, and getting used to like listening to my inspiration, that I would have these weird little blind urges, like, oh, I want to do this, and they're not things I necessarily understand. Like there's some mystery within it. But yeah, try some of those. Like write them down and try them out, and it could be something that involves other people, but it could be like, drive down the freeway and wear a glove that you like wave in the air while you drive, or like, I don't know, it could be anything, but I mean, just spend the next 20 minutes crawling around your house. Like that was a thing that I did, which was wild. Like I've never seen my house in the way that I did when I spent 20 minutes crawling around, like looking up at a ceiling fan, like interacting with ceiling fan with my feet. Like all of that stuff is real. Like you just start seeing the world in a different way. Like once I tried on clothes of everyone in my family and posed for a picture as if I was them, and that was just something. You can start doing things on your own. But yeah, follow the little tiny urges, see what it feels like. Write about it, journal about it, see where it takes you.
I love that. I love the idea of kind of, you know, like something about following the blind urge is like really natural for some people, myself included. It's like, yeah, I do whatever I want at any moment as long as I'm not hurting anyone. But I like imagine people that feel a little limited because of their history and being able to do that, kind of
Yeah.
getting a more powerful experience than just a creative one. Not that creativity isn't powerful, but just like opening up a perspective, like being on the floor, you know, like who's laying down on their floor at a whim. It's like, you know, it like offers a window into what it's like to experience performance art only because it's like changing your perspective. What do you feel about yourself has changed since you started performance art? Like, you know, you were mentioning kind of before and hinting at it, like your transformation.
So much. It's like so much. What has changed about me through performance art? I got used to moving towards my fear rather than away from it.
Wow.
I got used to being like enjoying being in uncomfortable spaces, and like receiving like the gifts that feeling uncomfortable or feeling nervous, like feeling on that growth edge, can give. Like I feel like I know how to deal with my issues a lot better, because one wonderful thing, one way you can play performance art is that it can be an incredibly healing and cathartic experience. Like I said, my first performances were like, what are the things I'm most afraid of? I'm gonna do them. And that was intense and hard. And I think I got to like number 3 where I was like, this is not sustainable. Like that was really hard, and it was very rewarding and incredible things happened. But I hit some walls. I'm like, I am too scared to do this thing. I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. So then I was like, well, what can I do? Like I can explore what it feels like to not do the thing that I want to do and be okay with me not being ready for that. So like one of the things I was really scared of was talking to my dad, having like honest conversations with my dad. So once I got there, I was like, I can't actually do that. No. But like, what can I do? So like I wrote these really honest letters, and then I mailed them to people in jail with my dad's name. And I was like, okay.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, and like putting myself in a physical experience that mirrored how I was feeling helped me understand my my feelings, and helped me find peace with them, and helped me work through a lot of the things that perhaps could have been worked through by something more drastic or painful. But yeah, it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It can be really anything, but like you can it gave me a way to address things. And like when you take something that's kind of murky in your subconscious and play with it, it becomes conscious. So it if you play with those blind urges, those things that don't quite make sense, like I'm really scared of my dad and I feel like ugh about it, but I don't know why, and like, well, maybe I'll do this. And like I didn't really understand at first, like, why would I send it to people in prison? It's like, oh, it feels so safe to send it to them in prison because they cannot respond. I didn't even put a respond address. And then it's like, well, is that shitty to do? So that's another thing is, and then I realized, you know, like there's a ton of shit that I'm giving people that is not because of them. So that became like the next step is like, I started writing letters to lots of people I couldn't address, and then giving it to people just that slightly reminded me of them. And it became like, oh yeah, like I do this to people a lot. Like I treat people as if they're who hurt me, they're the people who hurt me when they're not. And so that was really helpful to like untangle some of the ways I was dealing with people. So those are just like some examples of taking these things that are murky and making them a physical thing that I can interact with and play with, and then get a larger understanding of.
Wow, I love that. I would totally read your book, babe. Like 100%.
Aw, thanks. That's nice to know.
We fucking flew through those 45 minutes. I kind of wanted to get a little perspective on like things that you've said to me in reference to production, like the importance of documentation and like things around like paying artists. Like, is there a way that maybe, because I mean, lately, this is kind of selfish, I've been kind of working through like exploitation versus expression and like how do we collaborate in community? And so I want to kind of get your perspective on that.
Right. That is a great question that is hard to squish into the last few minutes.
Give me all the answers. I know it.
Yeah. So there's like I've found that I think about this a lot. There's like an interesting balance of acknowledging the power that you have and using it. And then not using your power at all. Like, and there's kind of a like hiding away. So I'm always trying to figure out like the best way to show up, how to use my power in the best way. It's kind of confusing, but it ties into these things. In documentation, it took me a really long time to realize that it was important to honor the work that I'm doing by documenting it, that what I was doing was worth taking pictures of. And it was a lot of times something like I forgot, or like it was like fifth on the list. But fortunately had an amazing photographer who just randomly started coming to performance art night and practicing on us. And as soon as the pictures were online, like incredible opportunities came out of it. I got to go to a festival in Germany because of these things. And because someone came in and practiced taking pictures on me and let me have them and let me put them up. And giving people a better understanding of what's happening, like to shine a light on what's happening with like some integrity. Like, this is really good. Look how beautiful it is. Like, it's worth investing in something that really shines what you're doing. I think I had a lot of feelings of like, well, I don't give a shit if anyone cares about it. I know it's important and like they can figure it out, whatever. But like, if I'm doing something, and I mean, that's something, but like if I'm doing something valuable and important, people, and I speak about it with that knowledge, people receive it better, people understand it better. It's worth it to invest in communicating that well and not let that value get washed away. So documentation is something that I started investing in it after realizing how valuable it was for me as an artist to have these beautiful images. And it was a big part of experimental action. I think it's a huge part of why we got the attention and the funding that we did. Our documentation is better than any festival that I went to by far. And we put money towards it because we want the art is so valuable and important, and we want it to be seen that way, and we want it to be seen. We want people to understand the beauty of it. So that's like, don't like invest in that if that's what you want. And some people are, my teacher told me, you know, like some people are in performance art to become amazing performance artists, rock stars, and some people are in performance art because they just want to get a little truth today. And it's like, yeah, if that's what you want, then do it. And I can understand if that's what you're doing, like if that's the value you're getting at it, then yeah, you don't need to spend money on documentation. But if what you want is to be seen and heard, if you want your work to be resonant, if you want to go out and do other things, it's important to do that. And then in regards to paying artists, yes, I've had like so many conversations on this, and it's very difficult because I think you're like me in that we're working with small or little budgets, right, to do
Yeah.
big things. And I imagine also like me, you put a whole lot of your time and effort and life power into these things, and it doesn't match the monetary amount that currently exists for it, right? Like we are not getting paid hourly, minimum wage at all, usually so far, but hopefully, you know, we'll figure this out. I love Jim's story because Jim actually did become a millionaire being a crazy performance artist and without even trying. But anyway, so when it comes to like who should pay artists, I would love to be able to pay artists, and I would love to pay them what they deserve, but I haven't even myself figured out how to get even a small portion of monetary compensation in comparison to the time that I'm putting into this. But I'm doing it because I receive value in other ways, and I think there's a whole lot of value that exists in this stuff. And I think it's important to think about what value you can give people, and what value you can't, and be honest about that, and be really completely open and willing and respectful when people don't want the value that you can give and want something else. Like if someone needs a lot of money, a high paying job, I cannot be the one that gives them that. Like if they want experience and knowledge and a stage, and an opportunity to practice being on stage, that I have. And like, so performance art night is interesting because, I mean, it doesn't make enough money to pay the artist hardly anything at all. Like, so like, we probably have 10 or 12 artists, or I don't know, 8 to 12 artists on stage. And if we cut the cover price, that'd be like, I don't know, $10, $15 each. But then even then, like the organizers putting in all this time. There's no way to fairly compensate everybody for the hours and hours of work and effort that they've put in to make this thing happen monetarily. There's just not at this point. I think that there are people in the world creating structures that can more easily pay artists, and that's awesome. And I am definitely thinking about ways to do that. And I think I've figured out some ways, but I can't even pay my credit card bills. So so I think as artists, as an artist, you have to be honest with yourself and think about, like, is this opportunity going to give me the value that I want? Is this a fair exchange? Is this what I want? And if it is, then do it. And if it's not, don't do it. And I think that there are people out there taking advantage of artists, but also I think that there's a whole lot of people in a sector that doesn't make a lot of money trying to figure out how to make money. And it's a whole bunch of people trying to serve the artist community and not knowing how. So like, I think it's important to think about, like, when you're criticizing the exploitation of artists, like, think about, like, are these people exploiting artists, and how and why? Like, what are they getting out of this? What do we want? And also let people get the value that they want out of things. If that's a value that matches for them, let them get it, you know? Like, there's a whole lot of opportunities, like, hey, you know, you get 25% back of this sale at our gala auction. Is that what you want? Like, do you want the exposure to those rich people? Do you want to give them 75%? Like, you probably couldn't get that price on your, like, is that a fair exchange? If it is, do it. If it's not, do not. And I mean, I think it's important to say what we want. And I like that there are movements out there, like, spelling out what artists want. And I like that all of us are getting together and say, like, what we do is valuable. And that there's been more light on all the value that artists bring to society. I love that, and I'm all for that. But also I think that you can get lost in, you can start hurting, you can start getting mad at people with really good intentions, who are working really hard to serve you, inadvertently. I remember one of the things Elia said to me was, she was like, don't bite the hand that serves you. She said that to us after we did a real messed up project on the U of H campus, and they were real mad at us because we did a messy project at U of H and left it there because it was a beautiful mess. But they were pissed. And they were pissed, and she had been trying to convince them to have performance art there, begging them to, like, let us have this class, and then the class did this, and it was
That's so funny.
And she was like, if you want to mess something up, like, let's think about who the enemies are, and how we can fuck something up in a way that matters, like, in a way that's positive. Like, let's not fuck up the people who are, like, letting us have this class. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fair. Like, we could have done this at a bank. We could have done this at the Galleria, and it would have been way cooler. I don't know, because even then you're, like, fucking over the janitorial staff or something. But like, thinking about, who is this hurting, and is it helping my cause? Like, is it really, like, what are the goals here? And how do I address this in a way that matches our goals? And I think a lot more people than we realize want us to be taken care of, and want to hear how to take care of us, and really want to do that well. And I think that having conversations with them, being honest with that, being honest with ourselves about what we need and want. I know this whole experience, like, I'm extremely, like, when all this stopped and my job stopped, I was like, holy shit. Like, I've been doing, like, I have not been honoring myself. I set myself up to be really vulnerable. And I thought that all this performance art night stuff, like, wasn't important enough to, like, create, like, a financially secure situation for myself. But I want the world to think I'm worth taking care of right now. And it's like very I can figure out how to put what I do into unemployment. Like there's no way for me to get unemployment, but I was like, but I realize now that I'm worth being taken care of, and I want to like show up in a way where that happens. I want to make it clear that that's a need that I have and that the other artists in my town have, and that we're providing this value and that we deserve to be taken care of too. But yeah, I mean, it's complicated. I do ask myself all the time, like, how can I make sure I'm giving the most value possible to the people who are giving things to me? And I try to be very, very aware that the projects that I do, in which a lot of people come and a lot of people work really, really hard, and a lot of people tell all their friends and bring it, like that's not a way for me to make my living, like off of the free work of all these other people. That's not how I want to make my living. Like I want those things to feed back into the community, create more better things for the community. Because yes, like that $100 to the performance art night chopped into 12 pieces, like if everyone got $10, okay, we'd all get $10. But if we all pitch in and give it to a photographer and we all get these beautiful photos, like to me that's a more value than $10. And I know that maybe that's not for everybody, but if you need $10 that much, like I really truly, like, you shouldn't try to get it from making performance art at performance art night. Like you shouldn't. It's a bad idea. Like there are so many easier ways to make $10, I promise you. Like
That's funny.
that's not the exchange that can happen here. It's just, that's not what we're set up to do. It is set up to give a different value. And there are photographers that when they started helping us, they could do it for this smaller price, because even the photographers are like doing us huge favor by doing it at a smaller price. Kylie is a wonderful, amazing angel for all she's done for performance art night. But a lot of the money that we make goes to her. And she gives us this gift. And when she makes more money other places and she's too busy, like I bless her and want her to go on her path. We had a videographer who could do stuff for us for a while, but then his prices got too high. He wanted to do other things. I was like, good, go do it. Like we'll find someone else who wants to be here, wants the value that this has that isn't money. Like if you can get better value somewhere else, go to it. It is important to me that everyone who works with me feels like they're receiving value and isn't being taken advantage of. And hopefully, like sometimes the communication is skewed and they don't see the value in what I'm giving. And I want to bless them on their way, and I want them to make all the money that they can make wherever they can. There are a lot of organizations that have way more money than what we do. But like the festival has, I mean, if you saw the way we stretched money, you'd be so amazed. Like it really is off of so much blood, sweat, and tears and gifts of other people, because it creates something beautiful and valuable. And if the beauty and value of what we created are not for the people who are coming, like I want them to go get what they want somewhere else. It's important to me always to have like a good feeling value exchange on both sides.
Yeah, I love the frame of like understanding the value exchange, because I think that invites people that are producing to like take responsibility for their part, and then the artists to also take responsibility for their part. And that's just really sweet. And I think you're great. And we did it.
Thank you. Yay. Well, thanks, Brett. I appreciate it.
Where can we find you online?
JuliaClaireWallace.com, or I'm on Facebook, Julia Claire. Feel free to add me. PerformanceArtHouston.com is one of my websites that has an amazing resource list if you want to learn more about performance art. The best videos and little write-ups I could find are all there at PerformanceArtHouston.com. And then ExperimentalAction.com is more about the festival, and that's also on Facebook and Instagram. So all those places. And julia.claire.wallace on Instagram is me as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for everything that you do and for being here for the interview and being patient with my cat.
Yeah. Thanks for having me,
All
Britt.
right.
Have a good day.